Writing your own performance review. In some organizations, supervisors request that employees draft their own performance review as part of the annual review process. Self-assessments have become very popular, partly because employees have far more information about their own jobs and daily activities than their managers possibly could. Here are some tips as you prepare your own performance review. Be sure you understand the format for the review and what areas you are expected to cover. If you don't, ask. Don't be too modest. Research shows that most employees rate themselves lower than their managers would. Some people are embarrassed at the prospect of praising themselves, so they are too modest in describing their achievements. If you feel this way, imagine you are describing the work of someone who reports to you, and give that person the credit they deserve. Use this opportunity to discuss problem areas. If you know your manager is unhappy about something, you have an opportunity to shape the discussion by addressing it right up front and presenting your perspective on the problem. Be diplomatic. If you feel something is being mishandled, find a neutral way of describing the problem. Don't make your boss defensive. Consider asking for feedback from your colleagues. Ask them to give you an honest appraisal of your performance as a coworker. Be specific. If there are particular achievements you're proud of or areas you put in a special effort, highlight those. Writing an effective performance review. Whether you run a small company or work in a large multinational organization, writing an effective performance review can motivate a high-potential employee, manage the departure, voluntarily or involuntarily, of a low performer, and may help to protect your organization from an unwanted wrongful termination or discrimination claim. Some specific examples. Your company is struggling and you don't have enough in the budget to pay your star performers as much as you'd like. An appropriately positive review can have a tremendous impact on morale. This is an opportunity to discuss future goals as well as what motivates him or her, which you may discover is not just money. Your employee is not performing up to expectations. Perhaps you've had individual informal conversations with this worker. Many employees don't put two and two together unless it's spelled out for them, meaning that they may think that these individual conversations aren't indicative of overall poor performance. The performance review period is the time to provide your staff with the big picture and make it clear what needs to be improved and in what time frame. If the situation is made clear, the poor performer will do one of two things: attempt to improve or look for a new job. In either case, your company is benefiting. One of the many hats that an HR professional wears is to consult with managers when the difficult decision is made to terminate the employee's employment. In some circumstances, managers have never given the employee a formal review, or, worse, have given them a positive review. In these situations, the company may decide that terminating the employee's job at that time is too risky, and as a manager, you are put in a position to build a case for termination. This may take months depending on the length of the service of an employee. The first question I ask a manager who wants to terminate someone's employment is, will this employee be surprised? If an employee has no idea that his performance is poor, how will he know what to improve? One suggestion is to keep a simple log of issues, both good and bad, throughout the year. Make sure that you keep track of your emails and conversations in this log. This will make it much easier to recall the important events that happened months ago. The bottom line is that keeping an open dialogue with your team, giving consistent feedback, and reviewing performance and accomplishments at least once a year, twice is even better, will help you to reach your goals at your organization. Michelle Cohen is Managing Director, Human Resources, Fortress Investment Group. Resignation letter. It's time to move on. Whether you found a better job, decided to move away, or chosen to go back to school, it's worthwhile putting some care into your resignation letter. A well-written resignation letter can help preserve goodwill and leave behind a good impression. Resignation is best handled through a face-to-face conversation followed by a formal resignation letter delivered by hand. If, for some reason, email is your only choice, be sure your resignation email is a formal and correct business communication. Introduction. The obvious purpose of a resignation letter is simply to let your employer know that you are leaving and the date of your resignation. A secondary purpose can be to foster goodwill with your soon-to-be former employer. Even if you have been less than happy in your job, a resignation letter can be a good opportunity to rise above the current difficulties and go out on a positive note. Don't worry about what your reader is likely to think. If you treat your reader with professionalism and courtesy, you have done your job. There is little content to brainstorm here. In fact, less is usually more in these cases. Resignation letters should be brief, and they generally follow a standard format. Use the model outline to help you organize yours. The tone of your draft should be businesslike and cordial. If you are leaving your job because you are unhappy, it may be helpful to write a draft, at home, not at work, saying all the things you really want to say. Once you've got all that anger out of your system, sit down and write an appropriate and businesslike resignation letter. Consider showing your draft to a trusted friend and revising it based on her feedback. Model outline. Keep your resignation letter brief and professional. Opening. Begin your letter by stating that you are resigning and give your resignation date. Middle. Courteously state the reason for your resignation. If you are leaving because you've had a bad experience, do not allude to the problem in this letter. Simply express your appreciation for the opportunity you have had. Conclusion. Finish your letter with good wishes and express your interest in staying in touch in the future. Do wait until you're ready to go. In some jobs, you may be asked to clean out your desk as soon as you've submitted your resignation letter, especially if the job involves sensitive information or security clearance. To avoid being caught off guard, be sure you are prepared to leave when you hand in your resignation letter. Do keep it brief. Whatever the circumstances of your resignation, your letter should be concise. Do state the date of your resignation. Be aware that you may be asked or required to leave sooner. Do be businesslike. Your resignation letter will go into your employee records, so don't say anything you might regret later on. Do offer a reason for your resignation. It's courteous to let people know why you are leaving. If you are resigning because of bad circumstances, keep your letter very neutral. Do say something nice. Even if you had a bad experience in the job, you can express appreciation for the opportunity you had, or at least let them know you learned a great deal while working there. Do offer to help with the transition, if you are willing to do so. Do thank your reader. Wrap up your letter with an expression of goodwill and a desire to stay in touch in the future. Don't write a resignation letter when you are angry. Any letter you draft in a state of high emotion is likely to be something you regret later. Don't resign if you don't really mean to. Resigning or threatening to resign as a negotiating tactic or a way to get what you want often backfires and will not endear you to your boss or your colleagues. Don't complain about the company, the job, your boss, or any of your co-workers. You could lose a potentially useful reference by being unpleasant. A formal exit interview, if you will have one, is a better place to discuss any problems you may have encountered. Don't blame anyone. Even if you feel pushed out, it's better to take full responsibility for your decision. Don't write a passive-aggressive letter. It's easy to let resentment creep in without being aware of it. Have someone look over your letter before you submit it. Don't say anything that will make you look foolish. For instance, you may feel they'll be sorry when you're gone and wish they had treated you better, but don't say that. You'll just look silly. Don't go on too long. Keep the letter brief and businesslike. Not like this. Dear Jerry, this is my formal notice that I will be resigning my position as account executive. My last day will be March 30th. While I appreciate the opportunity I initially had at Dunham, recent organizational changes have made it impossible for me to do my job. Supervision clearly does not understand the work we do, and I'm sure the severe lack of morale has not escaped your attention. Linda needs to cool down and rewrite this letter. She does no one any good by grousing about the job and snidely blaming Jerry for his poor management. I regret having to make this decision, but I have been left with no choice. Sincerely, Linda Calabra. Linda looks angry and unprofessional. She may be perfectly justified in feeling as she does, but she should take the high ground in her resignation letter. Like this. Dear Jerry, this is my formal notice that I will be resigning my position as account executive. My last day will be March 30th. I appreciate the opportunities I have had at Dunham, and I have learned a great deal here. I wish you and the team success in the future. Sincerely, Linda Calabra. Linda's resignation is professional and concise. She does not air her grievances, nor does she misrepresent the working conditions she's suffered through. She simply conveys her message professionally. Not like this. Dear Claire, as we discussed this morning, I am sorry to notify you that I will be leaving my position as practice manager. My resignation is effective June 23rd. I have been offered a position as Assistant Director of Patient Relations at the Equine Medical Center. I am very excited about the opportunity, particularly as I will have the opportunity to work in patient outreach and marketing. Brian is going on too long about his new job, and he's beginning to sound like he's gloating. I have learned a great deal working for you, and I am looking forward to implementing those lessons in my new position. I am also looking forward to a limited schedule with no after-hours responsibilities and a full staff to support me. Ouch. That was a passive-aggressive swipe at Claire, disguised as excitement about his new job. I would be happy to work with my replacement to assist him or her in getting up to speed so that the transition is as smooth as possible. However, I expect my new position will be very demanding, so I will have limited time to spend on the transition. What exactly does this mean? Is Brian available to help or not? He is sending a mixed message here. Thank you again for the opportunity to work with you, Claire. You are an exceptional veterinarian, and it has been a privilege to work with you. I hope we can stay in touch. All the best, Brian. Like this. Dear Claire, as we discussed this morning, I am sorry to notify you that I will be leaving my position as practice manager. My resignation is effective June 23rd. I have been offered a position as Assistant Director of Patient Relations at the Equine Medical Center. I have learned a great deal working for you, and I am looking forward to implementing those lessons in my new position. This is all Brian needs to say. It's understood that he's moving on to a bigger job. I would be happy to work with my replacement to assist him or her in getting up to speed so that the transition is as smooth as possible. I start work at EMC on July 7th. As we get closer to June 23rd, let's talk about how I can best support the transition. It's always a little complicated offering to help your replacement, since you don't know when that person will be hired or exactly what kind of help will be needed. Brian deals with this well by stating the outer limit of his availability and opening a dialogue about how to address the problem. Thank you again for the opportunity to work with you, Claire. You are an exceptional veterinarian, and it has been a privilege to work with you. I hope we can stay in touch. All the best, Brian. Termination letter. Terminating someone's employment is always difficult. A well-written letter can soften the blow, make the process smoother for everyone, and help protect your rights as an employer. Terminations are best handled in person and followed up by a formal letter delivered either by hand or via certified mail. It is not appropriate to send a notice of termination by email. Introduction. The purpose of a termination letter is to give formal notice to an employee that his employment is coming to an end, to notify him of his last day of work, and to state the conditions of his termination. If you have discussed the matter with the employee prior to giving him the letter, he should not be surprised by the news. However, you can expect that your reader will not likely be very happy about the letter and its contents. You can cushion the blow and make the process smoother for everyone by putting yourself in your reader's shoes and crafting the letter with his feelings and his point of view in mind. As you brainstorm, ensure your letter is complete. Your letter should answer all the employee's questions about the termination, the effective date, the terms, any action required by him, any benefits or pay still coming to him. The structure of a termination letter is simple and straightforward. The model outline provides a template you can adapt to organize your own letter. As you draft, make sure your tone is professional and businesslike. Once you have a complete draft, show it to an associate to ensure it is appropriate and complete. It is also wise to have an attorney review the draft. Revise according to the feedback you receive. Model outline. A termination letter should be businesslike and complete. Opening. Mention your meeting with the employee, let him know his employment is terminated, and let him know the effective date of the termination. Middle. State the reasons for the termination and review all efforts made to correct the problems prior to the decision to terminate. Review the conditions of the termination, any benefits owed the employee, and any actions the employee is required to take. Conclusion. Provide the employee with a contact should he have questions. Do familiarize yourself with any guidelines your organization might have for writing termination letters, and follow them precisely. Failing to do so can have serious legal implications. If you work for a small company that has no such guidelines, or if you are self-employed, it's wise to let an attorney look at your termination letter before you present it to the employee. Do consider providing a reason. It is not always necessary to state the reason for the termination, particularly when the employment has been at will, or you are releasing temporary employees. However, when an employee is fired for cause, you may wish to state the reason for termination, as well as documenting the steps taken to resolve the problem prior to the decision to terminate. Consult legal counsel to ensure your letter is appropriate and provides your company the strongest possible legal protection. Do be consistent with your reasons for terminating the employee, both in your conversations and in the letter. If your reasons seem to shift, you may look dishonest. Do state the final day of employment. Do state any other terms of the termination, such as severance pay. Do explain the disposition of any employee benefits, retirement plans, health insurance, life insurance, and other benefits the employee may have been receiving. Do state the terms for verification of employment. Many employers agree to provide verification of dates of employment only. Check with an attorney. Do state any responsibilities the employee has in the termination process and give him a deadline. For instance, employees may be asked to return keys, ID cards, credit cards, uniforms, and so on. If these items are to be returned prior to the final date of employment, specify that date. Do provide the employee with contact information if he has any questions. Do use a template. You can make this job easier by creating a template that you can adapt for future events. It's a good idea to show the template to legal counsel to be sure it's appropriate and to help ensure that your organization is as safe as possible from future legal action. Don't show any anger or hostility toward the employee. Your letter should be professional and dispassionate. Don't go on too long. This letter should not be a record of every mistake or violation the employee has ever made. If you choose to offer a reason, do so concisely. Don't apologize. You may feel bad about having to lay off employees, but apologizing for the decision can backfire. This is a business letter that reflects a business decision. You can use a gentle tone, but don't apologize. Don't be melodramatic. In cases where an employee is downsized through no fault of her own, it's appropriate to use a compassionate tone, but don't overdo it. Help the employee maintain her self-respect and protect your firm against charges of unfair dismissal. Not like this. Dear Tony, this letter confirms our discussion today that your employment with Cummings and Hyman is terminated. The termination date is missing. This is an important omission with potential consequences for compensation, benefits, and other issues. As we discussed in our meeting, the reasons for the termination of your employment are persistent tardiness and poor job performance. Despite repeated warnings, you have frequently been late to work. What warnings? When? Tony could dispute this unless Sherry has documentation of these conversations. In addition, the quality of your work has been poor and has repeatedly caused delays in the processing of applications and has caused co-workers to redo jobs that you have supposedly already done. Your refusal to learn the processing software to an acceptable level of competence has harmed our overall productivity. This is beginning to sound like a laundry list of Tony's shortcomings. It's better to make one case strongly than to go on like this. Sherry runs the risk of sounding like she bears a grudge against Tony. Payment for your accrued vacation days will be included in your final paycheck, which you will receive this Friday. You may pick up your check from the reception desk, or we can mail it to your home. What about other benefits? Health insurance? Please return your security swipe card and your office key prior to your last day of employment. Which is when? Sincerely, signed Sherry Bigelow. Sherry Bigelow. Like this. Dear Tony, this letter confirms our discussion today that your employment with Cummings and Hyman is terminated effective as of this date. Tony knows he's fired as of right now. As we discussed in our meeting, the reason for the termination of your employment is chronic tardiness. You were given written warnings on January 13th and March 23rd of this year. During your performance review on June 6th, I warned you that continued tardiness would result in termination. Nevertheless, you have been late to work on several occasions since then, including June 12th and June 19th, when you were late by over an hour. Sherry focuses on one cause for dismissal and documents it carefully. Payment for your accrued vacation days will be included in your final paycheck, which you will receive this Friday. You may pick up your check from the reception desk, or we can mail it to your home. You will receive a separate benefits status letter that will outline the status of your benefits upon termination. The letter will include information about your eligibility for Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, COBRA, continuation of group health coverage. It's smart to create a separate document with information about benefits rather than including it in the termination letter. We have received from you your security swipe card and your office key at the termination meeting. Sincerely, signed Sherry Bigelow. Sherry Bigelow.